June 2008. Night fishing with my dad on a pier with a hotel on it. Pretty calm night, waves are low. Not a lot happening on the island. Moon fairly bright. Time rolls around to 2 a.m. I suddenly hear a steam whistle out in the distance. Low, droning whistle. Almost sounds strained. Ask my dad if he can hear it too, and he can. Drones on for a while before it fades away. Thought it was either a locomotive or it came from the oil refineries. Remember that the only nearby steam locomotives are literal museum pieces, and the refineries fully switched to electronic alarms. Recount how back in 1900 a big storm flooded a train trying to make its way off the island and killed everyone inside. Local story is that you can hear the train's whistle in the dead of night, but only when another huge storm will hit soon. Fast forward to September of that year. Hurricane Ike hits and messes up the island. A hotel that was on the pier ruined beyond repair and eventually demolished. Both the 1900 storm and Hurricane Ike hit in early September. Had dozens of night fishing trips in the years since. Never heard the whistle again. I should go night fishing again the next time the weather guys predict a chaotic hurricane season. Spooky. Thanks for sharing, Anon. Does the train actually predict the storms or does it cause them? If it took a similar time frame on both occasions for the storm to hit, how do we know that the storm isn't just the cargo that the train is bringing like a PMM witch? I feel like if a single spectral train had the power to manifest and call hurricanes to its location, it'd be like a minor deity class organism, so the more likely answer is that it just senses them. True, but the passengers may just be trying to get back home, and the storm that killed them is on board the train with them now. It would make it the same as most spectral trains, but it just somehow has a storm attached to it. The whistle so far away from the date the storm hits might be the conductor's warning to the people on land. Anon who posted the story here. The only subsequent years that a hurricane or tropical storm made landfall at the area were Harvey in 2017 and Nicholas in 2021. On neither year did I take a fishing trip that lasted as late as 2 a.m., so I can't confirm if it sounded off ever since my encounter. I can get the idea that it sounds off the warning months in advance to warn people on land because the original storm in 1900 took everyone then by complete surprise. Last thing I'll add is that both the storm of 1900 and Hurricane Ike were Category 4 hurricanes. Harvey made its second landfall as a tropical storm while Nicholas was a Category 1. It'll take a lot to make the train depart again. I couldn't find anyone else posting about its legend as a storm-predicting ghost, but I do see plenty of articles of the actual train that was caught and washed away by the storm. Be Grandpa. Sometime around the 1940s, I think. Deep south. Wild country bumpkins as far as the eye can see. There's a huge tree just north of Grandpa's hometown. A local legend claims the tree is haunted by a large man on a black horse. People have been said to make pacts with it. Others leave little offerings, hoping to gain favor from the tall man. Grandpa decides to make a deal with the evil spirit one day. Not going to go into detail, but Grandpa was an orphan and his life was really tough. So Grandpa goes to the tree. A man on a horse steps out, almost like the tree was liquid instead of solid. The man is huge and his face looks all blue and puffy like when someone drowns. Grandpa tells his story to the man. How he's starving and can't find work and has no money. How he's lonely and wishes he had a family of his own. So the man on the horse tells Grandpa to travel to a neighboring town. He'll meet a woman there with lots of money. They will fall in love and get married, and with her money they'll be able to buy a farm. The farm will earn them a decent living, and it will stay in the family, but that 2 of his sons will leave for the city and go on to become educated men. Grandpa will live to see them prosper and become important people, but there's one thing that he needs to do. There's a cave outside of town that belongs to the man on the horse. Grandpa needs to stop there on his way to the next town. He needs to write his name on the cave wall in his own blood. Then everything will happen just like the man on the horse said. Grandpa thanks him and leaves for the neighboring town. On the way he finds the cave the old man told him about. He goes inside and finds the walls covered in names written in blood. Grandpa pricks his finger and signs the wall as well. Then he leaves. Long story short, Grandpa met my grandmother, whose family was really wealthy. She and my grandpa bought a farm, made a good deal of money, and raised my dad and his brothers. Several years before I was born, Grandpa woke up to find the man on the horse standing by his bed. No horse. The man told Grandpa that he would soon be a grandfather, and that his grandsons would prosper, just like he promised. But
in the 35th year of his life, the youngest boy will be mine.
Then he slowly faded away. I'm the youngest of my dad's sons, by the way. Grandpa used to tell me this story and chuckle. He'd say there was nothing to worry about. He'd remind me that the name he signed on the cave wall wasn't his real name. After he'd been orphaned, one of the families in his hometown took him in for a bit. The name they'd given him was the name he'd written on the wall. So I'm sure you have nothing to worry about. Then he'd pretend to look confused and ask, "How old are you now?" I'd tell him and he'd nod dramatically and say, "Yes, I'm sure you'll be fine." I know this was just a bedtime story my grandpa made up to scare me, but man, could the old dude spin a yarn. I'm 25 now and it still spooks me to imagine he was telling the truth. I'll see if I can dig up some photos of the time I visited his farm and hometown. Don't have a scanner, so bad quality, but this enormous tree near my grandpa's farm is the exact type of tree from his story, according to him. Terrible perspective because I was 13 and took it being an artsy F word, but it was much taller than a house. You couldn't even wrap your arms halfway around the trunk. One more just to give you a sense of how rustic the area is. Here's a short tunnel that we took between the farm and the town over. Grandpa said this thing was there when he was a kid. Time for some heckin' OC. I don't even give a crap if anyone believes me. I just want to get this off my chest. Live in the boonies. Basically forests gerrymandered by houses and farms that go in and out of repair. There are several other houses right by mine, but I talk to the neighbors exactly never. In fact, I'm glad for it because the community looks like some straight-up Silent Hill shizzle sometimes. There's like a weekly spoopy happening, to the point where I get so bored that I just shrug it off as the status quo. Though several weeks back this changed. The time is 10 a.m., and I'm savoring being a lazy fella for not having to go into work that day, drifting in and out of sleep. Suddenly there's an ear-splitting roar. Check my laptop to see if it's an ad. I do comedy YouTube playlists to help me go to sleep. Just music tends to put me on edge for whatever reason. No ad playing halfway through a 2-hour video. Nothing in Darkseed 2 makes the sound that I just heard. Even if it had been, something that loud would have blown out my laptop's rather crappy speakers. Slightly confused, I turn off my pending alarm and drift in and out of consciousness with my laptop on my bed so I can roll over and check it if I hear the noise again. 2 hours later, halfway conscious, insert very loud noise I'm not going to try to imitate. The roar both sounded louder and closer, as well as clearer. It sounded like the bastard child of a bear roar and that foghorn cry Godzilla makes. Tactically what? Sounded like it came from behind the house. Decide I'm not sleeping until I find out what made that noise. Grab lightly ruined oak hiking staff, grab fireplace poker, bathe both in ashes. Whatever the F made that noise was clearly not from this heckin' earth anyways. Trek in a woods. Check glove compass to double check that I haven't been turned around like I had been before in the same woods. Glove compass is going beyond heckin' nuts, spinning like a top, occasionally pointing towards the direction of clearing I've visited before with friends. There's a dairy farm next to my house, but I don't recall Farmer Dan breeding heckin' mutants. Start to see stuff that's clearly off. Large movements through the gaps in the tree line. Low rumbling sound, unnatural heat. Suddenly very glad I hadn't changed out of my sleep shorts. Occasional burn marks on the ground. Yes, I'm the silly goober in the horror movies that moves towards the live hell mouth, apparently. Eventually get to the clearing to see what all the ruckus is about. Peek out from behind a tree. It's a feather-mucking dragon. Or at least that's what I'd assume. Think less Tolkien, more Lovecraft. It had pale gray skin that looked like boiled konjac, to the point where it appeared actively wet. It was hexapodal, balanced on 6 squat legs that looked like elephants more than anything. There were a pair of massive wings on its back that looked like they could actually lift that monstrosity off the ground. Even folded, they seemed beyond massive. Its tail looked like it had been stumped, not in the way that it had been cut off, but there was some sort of bulbous mass where the tail was supposed to continue. And then there was its head and neck. It was like some kind of effed up xenomorph. Recesses where its eyes obviously should have been, but they seemed to have skin over them, yellowed teeth sticking out of its closed maw on both sides, painted red with the gore of the cow it had just finished eating. And that's when my brain got a chance to catch up from, holy crap, a dragon, and got a chance to look at the rest of the clearing. It was totally scorched, like basically everything was blackened. Hear snapping noise in the woods roughly to the left of me. Dragon looks up. Its head is pointed at a decidedly uncomfortable at-me direction. Hide behind the tree. What smells like ozone? Suddenly a rushing sound like a dam burst. About to look from behind the tree, but my judgment gets the best of me. Good thing it did, because I suddenly find myself a yard from a large stream of aggressive something. To this day I can't figure out what it was exactly. Going out of greentext here for a second, it didn't seem to be exactly fire or flammable substance. The movement was way too jerky, but it didn't spark or crackle like electricity. And I still have the right half of my body, so I'm guessing it wasn't plasma. But it sure as hell was burning anything it touched. A spark got kicked up and burnt a sizable hole in my shirt. Begin tactically praying at Old Norse once the fire goes down. Figure I'm not escaping, so I may as well go out fighting. Jump out from behind the tree, ready to suicide charge a dragon. Hear a rustling from the same spot as before. Boom! Same roar as before, followed by some decidedly unpleasant shrieking. Large gaping hole opened in an eye recess, here shouting, "Get the heck away from my cows, you hecker!" Holy crap, it's Farmer Dan. Not looking at him, focused on the big effer. It unfurls its wings and starts flapping and takes to the sky with surprising expediency for something that has a torso the size of an RV. And it certainly felt like a large aircraft had just taken off. I was nearly bowled over by the force of the wind. It circles in the air once before heading out towards the lake. Stand there for a moment, just plain vanilla dumbfounded. More movement, brandish fireplace poker. Farmer Dan is about 10 feet away from me. The gun in his hands looked like an old-style break action, but the barrels were ridiculously large in diameter. My brain finally processes the fact that I'm being asked a question. "Anon, what the heck are you doing out here?" Try my hardest to point out that that's not the most important question to be asked in this situation. Finally managed to coax an answer out of him. Apparently several of his longhorns went missing from the pasture, and he caught sight of it moving to the clearing after one more had disappeared. Hunter friends had apparently reported some weird going-ons in his backwoods to him. Said they'd found some freaky shizzle and some big-as-heck nest. Only one dead cow in the clearing, however, no nest to be seen. My brain refused to examine the possible meanings of those facts at the time. Ask him about the gun. Says he uses it to hunt whatever goes after his cows. The inflection implied it wasn't the first supernatural entity he'd shot at using this shotgun. Farmer Dan stops me before I get back on the path. "Don't tell nobody about this, Anon. No use causing a fuss over some fairy tale nonsense." I'm not about to disagree with a man holding what I can only assume is a 2 or less gauge. Walk back home and fall asleep. Wake up later that day assuming it was all some sort of effed up dream. Look down and notice the hole in my shirt was legitimately there. Brain reeling for not dragon-related answers. Half-heartedly settle on this somehow being the shirt I'd burned slightly during a bonfire several years beforehand. I'm forced to confront reality when I notice said shirt lying on the floor. Decide right then and there that I'm moving to the largest city I can get to so that I don't have to deal with this BS anymore. There was a huge rainstorm the next day, so a lot of the char was washed out, but sure enough, when I went back to the clearing several days later, it was filled with morel mushrooms, so it had to have been scorched at some point. I don't know what the heck I saw, and I don't know if Slash K would have any better idea on what it was, but if I ever know that thing's in the area again, I'm finding as many Slash K commandos as possible, and leading reality's probably first dragon slaying raid.